And welcome to another Pro Audio Suite. Thanks to TriBooth. You can see it in the background there. Take you to a hotel room and scare the cleaner. And also Austrian Audio, making passion heard. Anyway, we have a special guest today because we're talking iZotope and RX11.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's go.
Welcome.
Hi.
Hello, everyone.
To the Pro Audio Suite.
These guys are professional, they're motivated.
With Tech to the VO stars, George Whittam, founder of Source Elements, Robert Marshall, international audio engineer, Darren Robbo Robertson, and global voice, Andrew Peters. Thanks to TriBooth, Austrian Audio, making passion heard, Source Elements, George the Tech Whittam, and Robbo and AP's international demos. To find out more about us, check the proaudiosuite.com.
Line up, ladies!
Here we go.
Mike Rozett from iZotope has joined us and will give us a bit of a demo of what this new RX looks like. Welcome, Mike.
Hey, everybody. Hey, gentlemen. Thank you so much for having me. I am really pumped to be here.
So listen, you're talking to someone who's used RX for a few years now as an audio engineer, and I believe Robert has too. Is that right?
Go back to RX.
No, I've wanted RX, but I've not really. Yeah,
Back to 3 for you, George. Really?
Yeah.
Wow, that is a long time.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
So give us the latest and greatest, mate. What's been happening with the new product?
And what's different?
And more importantly, what's different?
And why should we buy it?
Well, I'm hoping I'm going to provide all those reasons, but it's been about we launched we launched on May 15th with RX11. It's been about 20 months since RX10, so it was a while, and a lot of things have happened. As you all know, the audio industry is moving at it's always moved quickly, but it's moving blazingly fast now with all kinds of sort of machine learning processing and people really embracing AI tools, everything now from generating ideas and songs to all kinds of sophisticated cleanup in the space that we're in with RX, with denoising and de-reverbing and stuff. So we really had to spend some time on going back to basically machine learning and really catching up is what happened over the 20 months where we didn't have our new release out. So some of what I want to show you and what I'm really excited about is the machine learning stuff that we brought in, kind of improvements to a bunch of our processing. So I think maybe the first place to start is with Dialog Isolate, because we've done some real work on that and we're, pretty excited about what it does now. So anyway, gentlemen, just stop me if I get into nonstop demo mode. Like, please jump in if something's clarified, you want some direction. Because I realize, like, my tendency is I can just go like a wind-up clock, and then I'm like, wait, nobody's spoken. So
Let him loose, baby. Let him loose.
Well, Dialog Isolate is definitely one of the things that for our audience is going to be interesting because
Absolutely.
A lot of our audience are voiceover actors or voice producers, and so obviously the goal is always clean audio, but not like totally sanitized or like antiseptic audio, right?
Yeah.
So that's the golden goose is like getting a dialogue clean, but still having a presence of a room tone, right? So
I think it's a room tone, just a semblance of a power drill.
Sorry. We need iZotope at your joint, Robert.
Yes, we do. It's the air around it, so it doesn't sound so choked. Like,
right.
Yeah.
Jesus, a lot of other noise reduction can kind of make something. It's like it gets rid of the noise, but it gets rid of the life.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I'm really glad you started off with that, because that was going to be one of the points that I made. And it's come to us from all kinds of different users, from high-end dialogue editors in the post world to folks who are just starting out. But, with very powerful tools, if you push things to their extremes, you can suddenly take or an interview recorded on the street or dialogue recorded on location and turn it into something that kind of doesn't exist in space and time anymore, right? You've turned it into what sounds like a studio recording and sort of sterile ADR by overly denoising or de-reverbing or taking the background out. And so you already got to one of my main points. So I'll show you in just a sec what Dialog Isolate can do. And what I'll do first is push it to the ridiculous level where it's lost all time and space and then back off on it. But I think that's an important characteristic of using the processing properly, right? Is not losing time and space, not losing a sense of what makes the space unique or what makes a place unique. So with this example, this is actually from a podcast. So let me just cue up a little bit of this raw, and you'll hear why we would want to work on it.
Improv is acting without a script. The main rule of improv is yes and.
What's wrong with that? Sorry.
Oh my god.
This is real.
Like that's
actually.
great for Robbo. That's like really good compared to what he usually gets from me.
That's Robert
you,
on the
Robert.
train doing our show.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so a very good material, but the background's not great. So for Dialog Isolate, for folks who haven't used it before, or if they've used it and I don't know about the new version, we've done two things. We totally updated the neural net. So there's a brand new neural net, and it runs in two modes. The one that I'm in right now is sort of good/real time. And this is the mode that now runs in a real-time plugin. So you can run Dialog Isolate in real time, and you get a really good, a very high quality result. But if you're working, for example, where I am now, which is in the standalone editor, you have the option to bring up best or offline. That will take longer. With better processing comes more demands on the CPU and takes a little bit longer. But that's where you get your best result. For demo purposes or for moving quickly, put in good real time, put it in preview, and then you can dial.
Which means that you agree with what the person tells you and you add to it. It's also a great skill for learning how to pivot on the spot, think outside the box, think creatively, team build.
We've taken everything out of the background, right? And we were just talking about how that's not ultimately how you probably want to go, unless you had a special situation where you were trying to maybe take a voice, and sometimes for animation or maybe for gaming, you want to take a voice, you want to strip away any of real life, and then you want to add back in the background. But for most dialogue editors, you're probably going to want to play more along these
and
lines.
all those things that we need in our real lives as well. When you work with others and you work off of their ideas, not only is it fun and stress busting, but it's comical and therapeutic. It's just a great opportunity to laugh. Improv is.
And so one of the cool things about this version, besides, and I'm going to just plug it again because we're psyched about it, having the real-time plugin that you can use for folks who are using the advanced version. So this version you're seeing is what it looks like in the standard version. We've never had dialogue in standard. We never had Dialog Isolate in RX standard before. We did add it this time in RX 11. But if you go to the RX 11 advanced version, you get a little something extra. And that is a multiband interface that allows you to dial in whatever processing you've set over on the reverb and noise side, or you could just do reverb or noise. If you do them both, the multiband processing affects both of your reverb and noise settings. If you've done something really aggressive, you've really brought down your reverb and noise, you now have the ability to have settings across these four bands. So if you felt, for example, that the de-reverbing that you were doing was really kind of landing in the low mids, you might want to target all of your processing to the low mids, and then you might want to be a little bit less aggressive in the lows. And if maybe you felt like the processing was taking away some of the high end, you could really back off on the highs and the mids, high mids and the highs. And you can also set your bands at different crossover points if you wanted to do that. And it allows you to kind of dial in what you think is going to be right for your particular sound. So that's a new feature. That one's only in advance.
That's very cool.
So I guess the upside of that is it will allow you to have less coloring. Like there'll be less artifacts in the areas where you need less processing.
Yeah.
Kind of the idea.
Exactly right. So in many cases, just showing up and ignoring this and working with your reverb and noise settings could get you somewhere really, get you really strong results really quickly. And you might be good to go and print or render and be done. But, every recording situation is different. And yes, if you really want to get more specific about where you're targeting de-reverbing and the denoising, feel free to kind of move those at will.
Can you reverse the process? So, so far this seems a lot like, as you said, you kind of approached it similarly to what some other companies may have done. And you see that multi-band approach. Can you reverse this and say, don't isolate the dialogue, but get rid of it? I only want the background.
Yeah. It's literally as simple as just deciding that the
Whatever
voice
it is.
needs to be
Yeah.
gone. Yeah,
Yeah.
you can do that, and you can do any combo of the three that you'd like.
Yeah. So in
Depending on how you want to do it.
the multiband select mode, is that will work? You said in real time. Does that work in real time as well, or is it just the basic? The noise and the reverb, or can I use the multiband in real time as well?
You can use it in real time. It's only in advanced, so don't look for it in standard. But you can do that. The thing that we find, and just to be really direct here, the fact that I've got other stuff running on the CPU for the session that we're doing, you'll see performance fall off if you have, for example, let's say you were doing this in real time and you're playing with the bands, you'll probably see a little bit of a lag depending on what kind of a computer you're on. I don't have my M series at this point. It's on the way. I'm running an older Intel, and you can truly see the difference in what modern day machine learning is making computers do in terms of processing. If you're on an M series, you're in a different world. I'm still kind of on the tail end of an Intel. You can see that performance. And so I like to say that to people, not because in any way I'm trying to push hardware, because I can't stand it when like you're forced to buy another laptop. But the truth of the matter is I want people to be aware of this, because with where everybody's going, AI and machine learning is going to be more and more prevalent in all kinds of things, not just audio. And a lot of the new machines have that, that NPU, that neural processing unit that, comes with the machine. So just to note that your mileage is really going to vary with anything machine learning. So
Yeah.
What's the sensitivity now? Is that just like your basic kind of threshold approach to things?
How much is it?
Yeah, sensitivity in this case does a couple of things. Higher sensitivity, so if you swing it this way, the numbers go up. Higher sensitivity is basically telling the separation that it wants to basically look at. Sorry, I just want to grab one note here because I want to get this right for everybody and for the viewers and listeners. It will allow you to remove more noise, but the trade-off is you sometimes get a sacrifice on clarity. So if you're going more separation, you're taking out the noise, but that can sacrifice, particularly at the high end, if you're really pushing it, you can sacrifice dialogue, for example, clarity. When you go the other way, when you go all the way down to the low end, the opposite happens. You will get more clarity in the dialogue, but then you're generating potentially more noise. So lower is clarity and less noise. Higher is less noise, but you risk clarity. And so
does it end up exposing a bit of a gating effect around the words? If you can that affect that kind of quality to some noise reduction where you hear it go, oh, there's dialogue, I'm going to clamp down on the noise, or you kind of hear it breathing,
It manifests more as artifacting. So you'll start to hear edginess potentially or some issues in the voice if you're pushing it, particularly if you're going in the higher direction. You'll start to hear the voice sound a little bit less crisp. And again, it varies by the audio that you're putting in. But in some cases, if you really push it, up to 10, you'll start to hear some of, it's not distortion, but it's a little bit of a quality of their voice that sounds like, oh, somebody's running their processing too hot, and you want to back off or back down from that.
It's like when you hear it.
Yeah.
These settings are, people so much are they want a number. I know with a lot of my clients, they don't want to get too lost in the details, but it really does. It's a tune it by ear thing. You really have to listen and make a judgment call, right?
That is absolutely true. I mean, one of the things with RX that I always say to folks is what's cool about the spectrogram is you can see your audio and you can see problems. And when you can see them, you target them. But that's no replacement for your ears, right? I mean, your ears are telling you stuff first, and then if you get good with the spectrogram, sometimes you can spot stuff before you've even played it back.
Yeah.
But the two are supposed to work together, right? And so your ears are your friend, and people will say, "Oh, I insist on running things at 2.3," and if your ears and the project you're on is really 5.0, go with what your ears are telling you. There's no hard and fast rules with that stuff, depending on the variability of the audio.
That's right.
I've found this whole look before you listen thing, and you see young editors not really understanding the power of scrubbing scrubbing's like audio zoom without having to like click there and go click, click, click in, click, click, click out. You can just find where you need to be, and you can be looking at it from a big, fat, ugly, non-detailed waveform, and you can get in there pretty specifically. And but with the, I mean, God, I remember the original RX, the first time it came out, and you could lasso around a frequency band and it would kind of do the Photoshop thing, but like whatever that mode is, where it's like the magic wand, and just delete, and it just take that chain or whatever it was at the high end. It's pretty cool. So the visual is more useful, I think, especially when you get into noise and being able to clarify what it is that you're hearing. They do work
like forensic stuff for sure.
Yeah.
You know,
I was speaking to you before we started recording. You were telling me about your train infatuation, so you can tell me if you actually had anything to do with this. But I did see on socials over the weekend an ad for the new version of iZotope, and you've got someone standing on a train platform with a train rolling in the background.
That's right. I've seen that,
and pristine audio. I mean, did you use RX in this mode to achieve that, or what did you use to achieve that?
Yeah, that's supposed to be that. Let me put it this way. First of all, about the train thing, I had nothing to do with that, even though I fully support the use of the train.
Come on, Mike, you were sitting in a meeting and went, I've got an idea.
Yeah, and I had to be on location too. No, seriously, I had nothing to do with it.
That's right. Let me check, and I need to pick the train too. Yeah.
And it needs to be. No, that is Dialog Isolate from this version from RX11,
right.
And we've they shot a couple of spots like that where really using it in a real life setting and then taking it out in a post production setting.
Because that's quite impressive.
Well, thank you. Like we're pretty fired up about this neural net, and you mentioned this. One of you guys had mentioned it earlier, but with Dialog Isolate, as you said, we pulled in Dialog De-Reverb, right? And you see that 3 kind of slider denoising, de-reverbing approach in a number of places. And the reason for that is the neural nets are getting so good now that you can train it to do multiple things. So we trained it to do what was traditional Dialog Isolate, right? Bringing non-stationary moving background noise out of the background. But then it was like, wow, this net is good enough to do Dialog De-Reverb as well. And many of us who are experimenting with different neural nets are finding that. And so it logically lands that you can put those 2 pieces of processing together in the neural net, and you can do 2 things. And the sky's the limit with that technology. Like as we go further down the road, and the processing is becoming, particularly with Apple stuff, blazingly fast.
You mean the Skynet?
There you go.
I mean, there is a
AI and Skynet.
Skynet is the end limit.
I'll be back.
Yeah. We joke about that, but I won't go digress too far on that. But the technology for tools that are way beyond just sort of like, I don't know, predicting a stock price or what the weather's going to be or cleaning, denoising is pretty staggering. But I was talking about like the happy stuff, with audio, and that's really going to a place that'll blow our minds in 6 months.
The AI will denoise all of us eventually, but that's fine.
That's right.
Well, I mean, it's getting to the point where you just you'll type into chat like, here's you put in 60 minutes of a street interview, and you just basically say to it, make this sound nice, and the tech's gonna do that, and that's no exaggeration. That's on the way.
So more important question is, did you take the chance to take all the knobs and make them go to 11?
We have been using this RX goes to 11 in a few spots, mostly sort of internally and in some of our kind of closed door demo stuff. But we did not actually make anything go to 11.
You should have made it go to 11. It goes to 11.
Actually, so turning back to something you just said about you would just say to the AI, make it sound nice. The question is, what defines nice?
Yeah.
Well, part of what happens with the training that you can do over time is as you add more and more data sets. And so, for example, let's get specific. If we're trying to train Dialog Isolate, we're going to use audio that sounds like clean speech, like in really great shape, and we're going to use the kind of noise that you would want to pull out of speech. And then you would do the same thing with reverb. You'd take reverberant spaces with an echo in the background and you train on that. And the thing that's kind of amazing about AI and machine learning and neural nets is essentially what you're doing is you're just using a lot of an example that's relevant to what you're doing. So as I mentioned, you could be training on weather data. You could be training on stock market data. You could be training on, modeling what happens when a car hits a wall, for example. And as you train on enough data, you begin to see the patterns. And then those patterns allow you to build them into the algorithm. And so I could take a piece of audio that we've never trained on, but when we throw it into Dialog Isolate, the patterns that are characteristic of what the differences between dialogue, what the difference between speeches get recognized. So as sort of chat stuff's coming into the world and we have qualifying words like nice or good, you can start to build a set of responses behind that. Nice is probably a little flaky at this point. You might want to say probably a more useful prompt would be denoise this piece of dialogue or denoise this interview or clean up the background audio in the, you know what I mean? It'll be a little more directive, but the whole
it's just going to get to the point where clean it up and then we'll do the rap version without the swear words too.
Yeah.
They'll just be included in there literally.
Hey,
iZotope. Clean version, literally.
Get rid of the hammering in the background of Robert's audio.
Sorry.
So I guess the question that comes from that, from being able to sort of say, hey, just do this. And this is kind of me folding two questions in that I had into one, because I kind of see the possibilities when you say that is, I also use Nectar occasionally. And so the two questions I have is, firstly, is sort of will some of this noise reduction stuff fall into Nectar? And then secondly, if you take that a step further in that case, sort of will, EQ and compression and all that sort of stuff be able to say, hey, Nectar, I want my audio to sound like this. I want this voice to sound like this. And the reason I ask is because even with podcasts, for example, I have a distinct sound that I give to this podcast, the way I EQ the voices and do the mastering and all that sort of stuff. And the other podcast that I do isn't produced by me. I do one about radio imaging, and Adam, who's in the UK, who puts that show together, he gives it a very FM sound. It's very compressed, very over EQ'd and compressed and all that sort of stuff. So do you see a time when all that may well come together?
Yes, I nothing you described is out of the realm of possibility. Again, it's what you decide to train on. So you've got the data, essentially the patterns of what any one of those things sounds like, and then you can put them together, which is what I was kind of hinting at with reverb and Dialog Isolate. But I think the grail for folks is, I'm a little focused on my world because of RX, but let me expand it a little bit. So I'm always talking about like, oh, you got raw location sound or an interview or something, you need to clean that up. How do you do that fast? Could you drop it into RX? Could you give it a command? Could it clean it up and spit that out? But if you're doing more complicated mixing, I mean, in theory, you should be able to sit down and say, okay, I'm going to do, a jazz combo with 4 musicians. These are the folks playing. This is acoustically recorded. I have a stereo pair on the drums. I need to think about denoising. I need to think about EQ. You wouldn't say think, but you need to handle EQ and compression.
Yeah.
In theory, you're going to be able to do that. And I don't think that's far off. Yeah.
Wow.
So when you train it and then it finds it's like, okay, that's what dialogue sounds like. That's what noise sounds like. That's what a train sounds like. And then is it re-synthesizing with what it knows in mind, or is it somehow applying some sort of never created before DSP to isolate these things? Like, what is the end process in the end? I guarantee it's not a bunch of expanders anymore, but like I imagine it's re-synthesizing the voice on some level.
In some cases, like we have a processing called spectral recovery. And what that does is it uses machine learning to look at what you have. And then let's say you have nothing above, 6K. Maybe it was a weird, Zoom call, or maybe it was something was compromised one way or another. So the machine learning in that case looks at what you have And then because it recognizes patterns, and the pattern in that case is like, okay, there's a harmonic structure here, but it stops. Like, what do I think would be the missing pieces in the harmonic structure? Or there's a transient, but I know transients usually go up to 20K, when someone like a snare hit or something's dropped, as part of a scene. I don't see that, from 6K and above. So what the neural net has done, or what we've trained it to do in that case, is to look at the patterns of the audio that's present, basically predict what's coming. And in that case, yes, it is synthesizing new audio that didn't exist before and adding it.
But in the case of noise reduction, it's not resynthesizing. In the case of noise reduction, it is somehow DSP processing, but like you said, it's no longer a fast Fourier transform. It's not a gate. It's all new stuff, I'd imagine, as far as
In this case, it is. So we distinguish between digital signal processing, which is sort of the more traditional stuff, like writing algorithms to declip and to remove clicks. You can do that stuff sort of the pretty traditional way. The machine learning, again, is I'm probably talking about it too much, but it is super exciting. But that's where you are training on it, and then that training is built into the neural net, and the neural net has a little bit. This is kind of fudging it, but it's a little bit like a brain. So DSP doesn't really have a brain, but machine learning kind of does. And when it sees patterns that it recognizes, it's looking to pull out the things that are noise, but try to leave the frequencies that are dialogue behind, right? So it's not going in with like a sledgehammer and smashing away at the noise. It's almost like it's going in with a scalpel and making a distinction between, okay, there's a voice that covers this frequency range. I don't want to take any of that voice out of that frequency range, or I'll feel like it's missing. But if there's noise in the background at the same frequency range, the learning and seeing the patterns, it's able to make a distinction without resynthesizing, and kind of pull out the stuff that you want and kind of push back or block the stuff that you don't.
Right.
And again,
so if it's not resynthesizing and it's processing, it's like it's either EQs, compressors, expanders, gates, fast Fourier transform, those kinds of traditional things, or it's resynthesizing without the drill in the background. Like how, because it looks at the waveform and says, I mean, even when I declick, like I'm in Pro Tools and I see a click and I'm like, oh crap, I know the waveform didn't want to go there. I am drawing the waveform where I knew it should have gone had the click not been there. And I'm literally, by drawing, resynthesizing that little portion of the waveform. Get rid of that.
Yeah, get rid of the drill. No, it's essentially knowledge of what the differences are and kind of being able to reapply it. But I think if you really want to go deep on it, I'm going to hit the wall pretty quickly as a product manager where I can go. But I can I can talk to my PhD colleagues who do this stuff if you want, and they can really tell you more about how far it can go. But that basic concept of being able to train on something, recognize patterns, bake that into the algorithm. The neural net is a sophisticated algorithm, and then be able to apply that works in a lot of cases, but it is very different from digital signal processing, and it does not have to involve resynthesis actually to work. So that's about probably as far as I can take.
And maybe this could be new processes, new methods of compression, like neural compression. It's no longer just a threshold and a thing. It's I know what you're saying, and I know that vowels have, like I'm going to go hard. I'm going to compress a lot here. I'm not going to compress a lot here.
Being able to control transients.
Yeah, almost like compression, like an audio engineer writing the fader instead of a threshold and a slope and a very hard set of math equations compared to
or something you might automate. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I'm kind of thinking of something like particularly for voice people who are, working from a home studio and it's not actually perfect. I could actually see this being used as a pre-tape kind of plug-in. So, you actually dial it all in. So it's working on the noise floor and everything in your booth and correcting it before it actually hits the tape. Would that be?
Would you bake it in before recording though? Would you bake it in before?
If you're finding, I would
DAW?
say if you're finding the faults with that room, I mean, if there are constant faults with that room, then why wouldn't you bake it in before it hits the tape?
Suppose.
At that point, you would want to bake it in because it might be someone has to bake it in who's got the knowledge of with and without the room.
I was going to say you'd
so
want
that
someone
the AI can set itself properly. You know, like
Because that's
it's all about data.
That's a big risk. Sending some audio and someone goes, where'd you
Well,
have
you
that
always
change?"
record a backup, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, of course you do.
You could use the VO passport to input
Yeah,
two
that's
signals
right.
on the left and right side, one processed, the other one unprocessed.
Exactly.
Yep.
So, Mike, we've got a bit off track. What else are we looking for in the new version? What else is new and improved?
Yeah, let me show you some other stuff. So in Dialog Contour, this we've had since since RX7 in 2018. Dialog Contour is a tool that is used to basically shape either entire reads or sections, syllables, little tiny pieces of a phrase or something like that. So that isn't new, but for folks who aren't as familiar with it, what you can do is you can either, this is Command A for folks who are keeping score, you can select an entire piece of audio and put it in, or if you wanted to target processing to a small piece, you could do that, and Dialog Contour picks that up. So let me play this. This is a simulated answering sort of a voicemail message.
Please listen carefully as your menu options have changed. Your time in queue is 4 hours.
So if you were cleaning this or anything like this, where you've got dialogue and you're getting slightly, weird reads on a particular syllable, this syllable up at the front, I'm just going to grab it right about here.
Please.
That please sounds a little weird to me. So
It was like squeeze.
kind of. And so if I wanted to go in and play with that, I could put some nodes in here on the pitch curve, and I could go up on the pitch or down if I wanted to. What I want to do, though, is I want to bring it down a little bit because I don't want it to go, I think the upward read is a little bit weird. So if we just do something as simple like that, we just drew in the line over the particular characteristic of the speech.
Please
Preview.
Please listen carefully as your menu.
So that's a little lower now.
Please listen carefully as. Please listen carefully as
the original. You'll hear that it's high.
Please listen carefully as your menu option.
And so that's one example of sort of working a little bit at a microscopic level, where you can go in and you can select any part of any speech. And if you're feeling like, somebody went a little too high in their read, you can bring that down a little bit lower. Same thing as if the intonation, same kind of situation, if the intonation's wrong, for like, hey, I'm really happy, right? You can bring up the pitch on that. And then you can also now, the two new things I want to talk about are the formant and the variation control. You can start to lift things and also change the quality of what somebody's doing. So I'm going to do this in sort of broad demo mode just to show you the range of things, and then we'll talk more about subtlety in a second. So if we go back to, I'm going to select this entire selection and the entire piece of audio, and then we just play it in preview mode and then do some extreme things so you get a very broad sense of what the controls do. So pitch we've had for a while, and that's going to be, I think, pretty obvious to folks what it does.
Please listen carefully as your menu options have changed. Your time in queue is 4 hours. Please listen carefully as your menu options have changed.
So again, I'm showing this in broad strokes. Most folks who are doing dialogue editing want to make very subtle semitone adjustments, right? But imagine you were doing sound design for I'm going to reference gaming and animation again. If you were really trying to create a new character voice, pitch could be one of the tools that you have. Formant will change the quality of the voice.
Please listen carefully as your menu options have changed. Your time in queue is 4 hours.
Please listen carefully as your menu options have changed.
And then variation is basically looking at the sort of natural pitch fluctuations that are already in the read. And if you push it up, you're adding sort of twice at 100%, you're adding twice as much expressivity. So if somebody was really talking like this and going up and down, you would really emphasize that. If you didn't like that, if you wanted to go more monotone, you could go in the other direction.
So can we hear those?
Yeah, let me play.
Let's hear the extreme, like
your time in queue. Please listen carefully as your menu options have changed. Your time in queue is 4 hours. Please listen carefully as your menu options have changed. Your time in queue is 4 hours.
We can go to
Please listen carefully as your menu options have changed. Your time in queue is 4 hours.
Wow.
Please
That's
listen
like the
carefully
make
as
it
your
sound
menu
like
options
AI setting. Right there.
That's the
Yeah.
millennial. That's the Gen Z read.
Oh, I like that. I'm
Here,
gonna
here,
have some fun
here,
with
do
that.
me a favor.
later.
Yeah.
Put the pitch all the way up and the formant all the way down, and
Huh?
then the
Please listen carefully
variations
as
all
your
the way
menu
up.
options have changed.
Yeah.
Multiband queue is 4 hours. Please listen carefully as your menu options have changed. Multiband queue is 4 hours. Please listen carefully as your menu options have changed.
It's still intelligible.
4
It is,
hours.
right? It
Please
is.
listen
You
You're
can
carefully
right.
still
as your menu
actually
options have
tell what the
changed.
voice is saying, even
Your
though
time in
it's
queue
super.
is 4
Agreed.
hours. Please listen
This is
carefully
great
as
for
your
making
menu
robot
options have
voices and
changed.
stuff. It's
Totally.
Just,
Yeah,
it's got
Yeah.
like that,
absolutely.
like on the extreme settings, it's got all kinds of.
The sound designer in me is jumping out of its skin right now. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
And that's and first of all, that was very fun. So thank you for allowing me to do that, because in certain settings, people are like, no, I want to hear it in 2 semitones. But the thing that's really important about this is it's really designed for a wide range of application, right? And so again, if you're working on, let's go back to Star Wars for a second. If you're working on the dialogue in the Star Wars film, you're going to really be tweaking pitch. You're going to be doing individual syllables. You're probably going to be literally working in semitones just to make final, adjustments to a dialogue performance. But if you're doing something like a sound design or super creative, it's a really fun tool to really push, the voice of whoever's speaking.
The radio imager in me is coming out right now, because I'm thinking about, zips and zaps and bangs and whooshes and throwing those in there and the possibilities of what might come out the other end too.
Especially layering it under a straight voice.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, absolutely. Like take the original, put that in there, screw around with it. And yeah, absolutely.
Telephone voice is so dated. I mean, the new telephone voice is digital mangled voice, not necessarily like, oh, no low end, no high end.
Right.
Yeah. So did that come from a request? Do you know, or was that just something that someone dreamt up?
This came from dialogue editors who said, and again, they're not the ones pushing the range. That's the sound designers. But the dialogue editors were saying, hey, listen, we like where you were going with dialogue contour, a few years ago, but I want formant control. That was a specific request.
It reminds me, what was the one back in the day? It was a pitch. Was it Pitch Doctor or Pitch? I think, but it was one of the first ones to come out with formant control, and it was just awesome. You could do all kinds of crazy stuff and make all kinds of.
Look, I mean, the go-to for radio is Serato pitch and time, but I can see it's 2 different beasts. Don't get me wrong, but I can see a use for that with the same sort of things I'm using pitch and time for right now. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm really glad to hear that.
Yeah.
Let's see. I'll jump to a few other things.
The mouth declick is always super impressive with you guys. That's one of
This is like the thing that in the voiceover world is the killer app.
Like you guys have that market for sure.
Yeah.
Mouth declick.
Oh, awesome. Thank you. Yeah, no, that is that's a real staple. I mean, people really can't live without that. And that comes.
Has there been much to do in regards to mouth declick in terms of optimizing it? Is that still done in the relatively traditional way, that mouth plugin? Yeah.
It really is. It's still I would say high end, but high end digital signal processing, right? It's not, we haven't put machine learning to that. That is one of those things that's been we've improved it periodically. Actually, when we hit last, I think it was a few versions ago. I'm going to do a full disclosure thing here, but it's an interesting story. I'm going to share it. One of the things we found out with mouth declick was that we had mostly worked on it in the context of sort of English and kind of more Eurocentric languages. What we found from some of our colleagues in Japan was that it was beginning to go after a couple of, I don't know how to describe the part of speech.
Legitimate syllables, yeah.
Yes, it was removing.
There's languages in Africa that are literally clicks. Like clicks are part of their.
They talk.
So that was exactly. So this was one of those moments, not as extreme as that example, and that is a very valid example. But this was us getting great notes from our colleagues, the team over there, and some of the folks that we sell the software to, and they said, hey, sometimes this works great, and other times you're literally mangling my language. And we're like, oh, okay, all right, we got to take that seriously.
So you guys should make a mode specifically for French. Just the French language. Like it
Do you think that one specifically? I think that fits
very
pretty
clicky.
well. But
I was going to say that's when they do the
super mouth clicky sound. Yeah, they need more mouth declicking than other languages.
yeah, that makes sense. With the Japanese language stuff, we went and we studied a bunch of samples, and we actually tweaked the DSP to fix that, because that we'd really gotten that as a note, is like, hey, you're missing this. There's this is crazy for me to say this out loud, but anyway, one of the things that we want to be working on for the next version is breath control, because breath control is one of those pieces of processing that would be immensely helped by machine learning in particular.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping to get to that down the road. No, I can't, not promising, but that's something I really want to look into.
Every week, somebody's asking me how to make
that.
my editing easier on my audiobook. How do I get this done faster? How do I deep breath this? And I'm like,
the problem with most of the deep breath ones is that they also take out the S's and they go after a bunch of other stuff that it shouldn't go after.
Yeah, they need a lot more
saying things like H,
Yeah, there needs to be a lot of machine learning for a deep breather to really do a good job, because the best deep breather is a literal human editor going through and manually.
The same goes for the declicker too, I would say.
Agreed.
Ultimately.
Yeah. Well, to a lesser extent, but
yeah, to a lesser extent.
Yeah. But the trouble is with deep breath, the way we talk is based on air movement. So breathing and talking both involve the inhaling or exhaling air, and it's trying to get some AI to or some kind of.
But sometimes you're absolutely right. Like sometimes leaving a breath on the end of something is necessary to make it sound normal.
Yeah.
Like some ends of sentences need to have a little to it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Some of the breath is part of the actual performance, and so when you have characters in a role, breathing can be actually a part of the actual performance. So this is why I'm so careful when I hear about somebody saying, well, the first thing I do is remove all the breaths. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. Like,
only if it's an announcer's thing. Yeah, but if it's
one of the
things,
one of the greatest giveaways for an AI voice is all those little breaths that, like sheesh, and all those little sort of breath things that happen at the end of certain words. That's one of the biggest giveaways for me.
Or overly obvious, overly obvious breaths. So like the Apple Speak thing, you can just type something and you go to the text and say Apple Speak, and it's like blah 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 blah, blah 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 blah.
Add in big breath.
It's like a code in between sentences. Yeah.
It's hard
totally.
ventilating it.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that'll be pretty amazing when that becomes reality. Not that you've shown your hand or anything, but I mean, it's technology. We all expect progress, and we just expect these tools to be, as you're well aware, like as AI has become a part of, is becoming progressively now part of our everyday lives. Not everybody, but certainly a lot of us who produce content, as AI is a part of, it is for me. The expectation level of what software should be able to do is going to rapidly increase at the same time. So as people can do more, it's just like when computers came along in the 80s, it's going to save you time. No, all it did was expect you to produce more widgets per hour. That's what computers. So with AI, it's just taking that and multiplying that by 10. So now because your tool can do X, there's no reason why it shouldn't be able to do Y and Z. And when is it going to be able to do that, Yeah. And that's what's so hard about developing in this current climate.
Absolutely. That's true on so many levels, because all of us who are on the on the software side, we're all scrambling to make sure we can deliver on that stuff, and then the folks who are on the content creation and side, exactly what you just said, they're all kind of like, all right, so now I can see what some of these tools can do. Then you should be able to solve 5 other problems for me.
That was really impressive for about 3 days.
Exactly.
I'm no longer.
But it's what keeps me up at night, right?
And trust me now.
It's not enough that I didn't have to do any work for that one, and I can still charge my client the same amount of money. I need to do even less work.
Well, there's
twice as much of that.
The other side of the coin. That's the dream, is to do less work for the same amount of money. Come on.
Yeah,
but we hear a lot.
Amount of money.
Yeah, for the same amount of money, right? But what we hear now from a lot of folks that are out there, because software has gotten so good, and this was even before AI was all over the place, but now certainly including AI, as folks who are editing on, big TV and film productions, the amount of time that the audio department is getting is always minuscule, and it's always at the end, and it's less and less. And then people are kind of like, we've literally had people say to us that if they're showing something to a producer or whoever the client is on the project, and they're just kind of like, just RX that. We don't even just, go fix that.
Yeah.
And then it becomes,
verb status.
The old fix it in the mix. It still exists even in a digital landscape. Exactly. Fix it in the mix.
Now there's RX it.
And by the way, you don't get 6 days to do it. We're going to give you a budget for 4 days because you've got good software. So go do that. And it's hard on those folks for sure.
All right.
And if you
has anybody asked you the
4 days,
opposite?
we'll make it 3. Yeah, exactly.
Has anybody asked you the opposite? Like, please don't make that because I'd still like to have a job.
Literally no one's asked me that. It's always the other thing, like, can you do stuff so I can go faster and faster and do more projects and and get stuff done? It's always like speed with the highest quality you can deliver. But I love that. I would love for someone to come to me and be like, can you slow down the process?
We have had people go to us about Source Connect and say, please don't make it less expensive. Like, I miss the days when ISDN was completely unobtainable and there was only 5 of us. We're like, I don't think I can do that. Like, it's.
Here's a question, probably the last question, because we're going to have to let you go. You've been with us for a long time. But just a quick question about where you had the pitch and all that stuff you were demonstrating before. I kind of see that if you're doing audio ADR, audio dialogue replacement, you could actually synthesize a voice if you had to drop in a part of a word or a word to match the original dialogue using that plugin, I would think.
Totally.
Yeah. That area of voice synthesis, which, you're starting to see people release some things, and there's some issues about, deep fakes and all that stuff out there. That's still relatively new. So the things that we're doing that are a little bit older now, like stem separation, whether it's musical stem separation or dialogue and noise and reverb, those have been around longer. Voice synthesis is a little bit newer, but everything you said is, in some cases, we're already seeing versions that are pretty respectable.
I've done it
now.
Even with traditional pitch shifting, and like you have 2 different words that you need to do an edit, and the person was low in pitch here, coming in high in pitch there, and then you just crowbar it into place, and it maybe sounds a little bit funny for a split second of a vowel, but you get those things to merge. I've literally had clients ask me to take a statement and turn it into a question, which is a little bit tougher, but you can start to approach it with just
pitch shifting.
Traditional pitch shifting. There's that.
Yeah. In some cases, you can do that with dialogue contour. You can shift a question to a statement. It's tricky. You can do that. Some cases you probably can't. But the idea of voice synthesis, truly like being able to, and again, I'm talking about, I'm not advocating, stealing or anything, but we're talking about in situations where, let's say you have a production and you have all the dialogue from a lead actor, and the lead actor has given permission and said, oh, there's a couple of things in there that you guys can fix, or you all can fix, and allowing permission-wise to resynthesize that actor's voice for a blown line, so you don't have to go back and do ADR, or to fill in certainly the stuff that they come back and do. Sometimes the action scenes where they're yelling or they're doing whatever, used responsibly and in conjunction with the people who are giving permission for that, you can do some pretty incredible things that don't require bringing actors back in, and that don't require setting up a ton of looping, which is often really expensive and hard to do. Used irresponsibly, you all know what we can do with people saying things they never said and that kind of stuff. But there's some really cool, genuine use cases in there that I think are going to really help anybody who works in audio. Those are on the way. And those are exciting.
Beautiful. On that note, RX11 from iZotope. Check it out. Hopefully this has been an informative podcast for you. To check it out.
I really enjoyed it and really appreciate you giving me a chance to talk about RX11. So
Mike,
even with the
it
setup,
was really fun to have. Yeah,
it's great hearing it from the someone on the inside out, and hearing what's going and what might be coming. So
absolutely, even more exciting. Yeah,
indeed.
My pleasure.
Well, that was fun. Is it over?
The Pro Audio Suite, with thanks to Tribooth and Austrian Audio. Recorded using Source Connect. Edited by Andrew Peters and mixed by Voodoo Radio Imaging with tech support from George the Tech Whittam. Don't forget to subscribe to the show and join in the conversation on our Facebook group. To leave a comment, suggest a topic, or just say g'day, drop us a note at our website, theproaudiosuite.com.
Take it to a hotel room and scare the cleaner. And also Austrian Audio, making pleasure. What? Making
what was
making
that?
pleasure heard.
Making pleasure
Not that
heard.
hotel room. Not that hotel room. Making passion heard. Oops.